Enjoyed an abundance of spiritual good things these 4 days, have we not? And now's the time. The time has arrived for the concluding talk of this Keep on the Watch International Convention. Why has this convention been a milestone in theocratic history? And what can we look forward to in the days ahead? We're eager to hear what Brother Gerrit Lösch, a member of the governing body, has to say in the talk, Keep in Expectation, Watching for Jehovah's Day.
This convention has heightened our awareness of the need to be watchful. We know that Jehovah's Day will come at his appointed time. Appropriately, the theme text for this final day is Habakkuk 2:3. Keep in expectation, it will not be late. This text allows no room for doubt. Jehovah's Day will come right on time. Prior to Christ's first coming, his coming as a human, there was great expectation among the Jews with regard to the appearance of the Messiah. When John the Baptizer started to preach, many wondered whether he might be the Christ. Luke 3:15 says, Now as the people were in expectation, and all were reasoning in their hearts about John, may he perhaps be the Christ? Well, John was not the Christ, but the Christ was soon to appear. So the people's expectations were fulfilled. Jesus advised his disciples to keep in expectation in connection with his return as Messianic king. In Matthew 24, verse 42 and 44, he said,
In Matthäus 24, die Verse 42, in einer Stunde, da ihr es nicht denkt, kommt der Menschensohn.
Some in the first century had wrong expectations about Jesus' return. They thought that it was imminent back then in the first century. Therefore, the Apostle Paul had to counsel the Thessalonians. Please read 2 Thessalonians 2, 1 and 2.
2. Thessalonicher 2, Vers 1 und 2 lesen, der Tag Jehovas hier sei.
But he, as well as the Apostle Peter, warned about a great apostasy that would happen, and the apostasy would result in the fading of the expectation. The New Encyclopedia Britannica explains the apparent delay of the parousia, or Christ's royal presence, resulted in a weakening of the imminent expectation in the early church. The institutional church increasingly replaced the expected kingdom of God. During the centuries, there were always Christians that maintained their expectation. For instance, Sir Isaac Newton wrote that Christ would return and reign invisible to mortals. Similarly, there was great expectation about Jesus' return or royal presence during the 19th century. Some expected it to be invisible, like Newton. Others expected it to be visible. The German theologian of Protestant faith, Mr. J.A. Bengel, set the date for Christ's return at 1836. The Mormons also believe that the return of Christ to earth will lead to the first resurrection and to the millennium. In 1856, Joseph Seiss, a Lutheran minister, wrote about the invisible advent of Christ. There was also an Adventist preacher, William Miller, who predicted the return of Christ for 1843. When nothing happened, he predicted it for October 22nd, 1844. He is considered to have been one of the founders of the Millerist or Adventist movement. Adventists believe in the visible return of Christ. At Battle Creek in Michigan, in the year 1855, representatives of scattered or different Adventist congregations met there and they adopted the name Seventh-day Adventists. But there are many groups of Adventists, like Advent Christian Church, Church of God of Adventist Abrahamic faith, then the Primitive Advent Christian Church, and the branch Davidians. And then there was George Storrs, citizen of New York and living in Brooklyn. He published a magazine called The Bible Examiner. He looked forward to the date 1870. A certain gentleman, H.B. Rice, published The Last Trumpet, and he looked also to the year 1870. Another group of disappointed Second Adventists looked to 1873 or 1874 as the date for Christ's return. This group was headed by N.H. Barber of Rochester, New York, publisher of the Herald of the Morning. And then there were the Irvingites in England. Edward Irving was a Scotland minister, and he made several predictions about the coming of Christ, starting with 1825 and also at the end 1866. Well, all these groups were wrong, but at least they kept in expectation. They kept watching. Well, it ended in disappointment because mostly they relied too much on men and not enough on the scriptures. Then there was Charles Taze Russell, whose waning faith in the Bible was restored by listening to a sermon of an Adventist preacher, Jonas Wendell. And subsequently he formed a Bible study group. Originally, Brother Russell was member of the Congregational Church and also Young Men's Christian Association. And he was brought up or raised a Presbyterian. He appreciated what he had learned from Adventism. To quote him, "I shall ever thank the Lord for that leading, for through Adventism it helped me greatly in the unlearning of errors and thus prepared me for the truth." So he wrote in the Watchtower of July 15, 1906. One morning in 1876, he read a copy of the Herald of the Morning. He visited the Adventist preacher, N.H. Barber, in Rochester, and they agreed on many points. Barber's magazine was suspended, but the two men decided to revive it, and Russell contributed financially. The revived magazine said on page 4, published by C.T. Russell and N.H. Barber. The two men also published a book jointly, namely, Three Worlds, and this was published in 1877. Also in this office, Russell published a booklet, The Object and Manner of our Lord's Return. The Proclaimer's book in chapter 5 says this: Barber succeeded in convincing Russell that Christ's invisible presence had begun in 1874. Later, Russell split with Barber over the issue of the ransom, because Barber denied the substitutional value of Christ's death. Under the guidance and with the blessing of Jehovah, Brother Russell's movement had grown out of Adventism, then away from it, and developed into Jehovah's Witnesses of today. After a while, Russell and his friends realized that the date 1874 was wrong, and he adopted the view that others had before him, namely that the return of Christ would happen in 1914. Already in the year 1844, a British clergyman, Mr. E.B. Elliot, drew attention to 1914 as a possible date for the end of the seven times. Another gentleman, Robert Seeley, also dealt with the subject in like manner in the year 1849. Then there was Joseph Seiss, a Lutheran minister from Philadelphia in the United States, and he pointed to 1914 as a significant date in Bible chronology. Our brothers had erred as to 1874, but they kept in expectation, looking for 1914. How meaningful is the title of our magazine, The Watchtower? In the 19th century, George Storrs, a preacher, published a book called The Watchtower. It was published in 1850. Storrs was publisher also of the magazine Bible Examiner, and he greatly influenced Brother Russell. Sometime after his death, an article from Storrs, it was published in our magazine, at that time called Zion's Watchtower. This was in 1884. And also in 1876, Russell contributed an article to George Storrs magazine. So there was close interaction. The name Watchtower was also adopted in connection with a corporation that was formed in 1881 under the title Zion's Watchtower and Tract Society. Brother William H. Conley was the first president, and Brother Russell at that time was the secretary and treasurer. And Russell became later the second president of the Watchtower Society in 1884. In the Proclaimer's book on page 576, you find both men mentioned. Well, what do you think? Do you agree that this historic convention of this weekend is proof that we are still on the watch and keeping in expectation? Well, a tremendous witness was given. We had this advertising campaign, and we received a few experiences. Some of them I'd like to read to you. One says, and I quote, "I thought that national costumes were only for our brothers and sisters, meant to be an encouragement. But it also was a good means to witness to business people and others on the streets. We had the invitations for the convention ready and distributed to the people, and even read certain lines on the printed invitation. Many promised to attend the convention. We could place many invitations. Well, one woman walked alongside the sister who sent in the experience, and she asked her in Russian language where we are from. I thought she was a sister, and I said, from Ukraine. Well, it turned out that she was also from Ukraine. She was from the same city and the same district. So I talked to her about the convention. And then she asked, who are you really? Only then I noticed that she didn't have a lapel card, and so I explained everything to her. So fine witness was given, wearing the lapel card and also distributing the handbills, the invitations. Coming here to the convention, a brother used the subway, and one of the employees on the subway asked him about taking down his name and address so the witnesses would visit him at home. The brother asked what moved the man to ask for that. And then the man said that he found a watchtower that somebody left in the train, and he read it, and he has great interest in the message contained therein. Well, there were some tourists that took pictures from the Olympic Stadium from outside. The brother noticed that and invited them to come in. And he asked them where they are from, and they said, we are from Sweden. Well, it turned out that the brother that invited them in was also from Sweden. Well, they came in and were very impressed. They commented on the happiness they saw in the faces of the delegates and the cleanliness. The son said, a 19-year-old son, I have the feeling I should change my dress. The father then said, what really counts is the inside. Yes, said the son, but really I can see that the inside of these people is also to be seen at the outside. We exchanged telephone numbers, and I invited them to our district convention in Sweden. Well, it is to be hoped that they will attend the convention there. Some brothers exchanged money, and at the counter, people noticed the badge, and the lady asked, what does it mean? What are you watching for? And I went on to explain that we keep on the watch about the fulfillment of Bible prophecies. I could witness about 20 to 25 minutes using the Bible. Well, it shows how good it is that we wear our lapel card. She said to me to call on her again, to bring her some literature. And she said, if I did not contact her so that she could come to the convention, God would blame me. I told her that as soon as I would get back to the hotel, I would give the information to a sister that lives here so she could get in touch with her. And we would provide her with the information on the convention. The sister was able to reach her by phone. And then she looked for her on this past Thursday to see whether she came, but she didn't see her. On Friday, however, she says, I was met by her and the sister. To my surprise, I found that she had attended the convention. She had asked her at her place of work to have a day off so she could attend this convention. And so she could learn what she should be watching for. She was quite impressed and took notes. She was planning to attend Saturday and Sunday with the hope that the husband would come along. Well, we don't know. They may be here now and even hear this experience. Well, looking at the lapel card, many people become curious. So when the convention ends and we travel home, don't take it off and remain in delegation attire. You may be able to give a fine witness in restaurants, at gas stations, and Jehovah will bless your efforts, I'm sure. We were very happy to have so many delegates from different countries. Some had to overcome obstacles to get here. One sister from Warsaw applied for a visa, but they didn't give her one. Then she seriously prayed to Jehovah again and made a second attempt. She went to the German embassy one more time, and she was surprised that after half an hour she got the visa. The lady that dealt with her said, the chief of our department grants you the visa. He grants it because of your faith only. He respects much your religion, she said. So don't lose this trust, as you were granted the visa thanks to your beliefs. The sister got a ticket for the night train, and on Saturday morning she was here at the convention. Some had even more problems to come here, like some delegates from Kazakhstan. Some had to travel hundreds of kilometers to get to a city where they could find the German embassy or consulate. Some even had to travel 1,000 kilometers. And the cost for the visa, 60 euros, is something that is equivalent to a month's pension for many. For others, it's a week's pay or salary. Well, we are happy despite the fact that some did not get a visa, that approximately 380 delegates from Kazakhstan are here at Dortmund and Berlin and can enjoy the convention with us. Well, I'm sure that you enjoyed the singing of various selections from our new songbook, didn't you? We are happy to announce that starting September 1, you may order through the congregations a new recording entitled Sing to Jehovah. This recording will contain 17 of the new songs recorded by chorus and orchestra. This recording will also be available to download from our website at www.jw.org on September 14. The same is true of recordings of Sing to Jehovah with piano accompaniment. Well, we also appreciated very much the new video, The Wonders of Creation Reveal God's Glory, and the new brochure, The Bible, What is Its Message, and the new book, Bearing Thorough Witness of God's Kingdom. Another highlight of the convention was the baptism. We want to welcome with all our heart the 282 new disciples who were baptized yesterday. Now, we had international conventions in 4 other German cities. The total number of baptized ones for all 5 cities is 1,367. A survey shows that in all the world, every weekend, approximately as an average, 5,700 are getting baptized. We also want to thank the about 7,000 volunteers who shared in a lot of work in some 20 departments here at the convention. And some have been helping out for decades. Well, it is appropriate that we also express our appreciation to various persons and entities. And I'd like to ask you to please hold your applause until I'm done with mentioning the different ones. First of all, our thanks goes to Mr. Peter von Löbecke and his associate workers as a manager, and the other co-workers by the name Silvan Bandke, Christoph Meyer, Thorsten, Georg, and Christian Kunter. And we also want to express our thanks to the district office, Charlottenburg-Wilmersdorf, Department for Construction, also to Mrs. Moritz Doll, then to Mr. Axel Strobusch, and then to the police that was very cooperative. We especially want to mention Mr. Eberhard Bund. He's in charge of the group number 22, and Mr. Moldenhauer and Mrs. Sieg, and all the others that helped along. We want to thank also the following companies. Mr. Sebastian Dubke, and from the company Aramark, the gentlemen Indelkofer and Lambiris. Now you can clap again. There's no doubt that the faithful slave is living in expectation of Jehovah's Day. There's various expressions in the Bible that we could mix up or confuse. For instance, the expression Judgment Day, which refers to the millennium. Then the expression Lord's Day, like mentioned in Revelation 1. And this one started in 1914 and ends at the end of the millennium. And then there's another expression, that's the Day of Jehovah. Well, there was not just one, or there is not just one Day of Jehovah, but several. There was one mentioned in Zephaniah chapter 1 on Jerusalem, when it was to be destroyed in the year 607 before our common era. Isaiah chapter 13 mentions the Day of Jehovah against ancient Babylon. Jeremiah 46 mentions the Day of Jehovah against ancient Egypt. Obadiah verse 15 mentions the Day of Jehovah against Edom. And there was a second Day of Jehovah against Jerusalem and Judah in the year 70 of our common era. Well, at Pentecost 33, Peter explained that what was occurring was the fulfillment of Joel's prophecy concerning the outpouring of God's Spirit, and that this too was to happen before the great and illustrious Day of Jehovah. Acts chapter 2, 16 to 21. The Inside Volume 1 says, that's in English, that Day of Jehovah came in 70 CE. But there is still a Day of Jehovah to come upon us, and it will affect the whole earth. Please read 2 Peter 3:12.
Indem ihr die Gegenwart des Tages Gluthitze zerschmelzen werden.
But just as the prophecy was fulfilled in the year 70 on Jerusalem, this one, coming upon the entire world, will just as surely be fulfilled. Well, what is Jehovah's Day that's going to come in the near future? The Inside Book explains, it is not 24 hours. It is a time of salvation and deliverance for the righteous, and the day when Jehovah himself is highly exalted as the supreme one. It is a day of fury, a day of distress and anguish. The Bible says that In that day of Jehovah, the people will throw their very silver into the streets. And the book adds, a sense of urgency is attached to the day of Jehovah by the prophets. True or false? The day of Jehovah in our time begins with Armageddon. Before you try to answer this, remember what was explained in the book Jehovah's Day. That was the book on minor prophets and their prophecies. It was released in summer 2006. And it says, all such false religion will be destroyed in the initial phase of the Great Tribulation. In the following great and fear-inspiring day of Jehovah, her political and commercial lovers will meet their end. Well, true or false? The Great Tribulation is not the same as Armageddon. And that's true, because the Great Tribulation lasts longer than just Armageddon. It includes the destruction of false religion that comes before Armageddon. Well, there's, as we have quoted, an initial phase of the Great Tribulation, destruction of Babylon, but there's also the final phase of the Great Tribulation, Armageddon. But there's also a middle phase where different things will occur that are mentioned in Matthew 24, starting with verse 30. It includes celestial phenomena in the physical heavens, a sign of Christ that will appear in heaven, not on earth, and we don't know in what it consists. Then there has to be the final sealing of the anointed, and then there will be the final attack on God's people by the symbolical king of the north. And only after that Armageddon will happen. The book said that the day of Jehovah would be following the initial phase of the Great Tribulation. But a few months later in the Watchtower, a little adjustment was made in the December 15 Watchtower. And it says, the greatest day of Jehovah still lies ahead, when Jehovah's judgment will be executed on those who have defamed his name. It will start with the destruction of Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion. Yeah. So the great day of Jehovah includes all three phases of the Great Tribulation. Then the Watchtower recently, May 15 last year, said this. And on page 15 and 16 it says, the Great Tribulation will begin suddenly. Yes, Jehovah's Day will come unexpectedly whenever it is that they are saying peace and security. Please read 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 2 and 3.
Denn ihr selbst wisst sehr wohl, und sie werden keinesfalls entrinnen.
Well, when will that be? The Watchtower said, the foretold tribulation will begin when the nations think that they are close to solving some of their big problems. Well, we have proved that wrong expectations on the part of God's servants did not lead to a loss of watchfulness. Let's start now to discuss a few points about different years. For instance, 1914. The Watchtower had pointed out that it would be a marked year, alerting people to keep in expectation. Watchtower said that the appointed times of the nations will then end, according to Luke 21:24. And this expectation came true. We still believe that. But most of the Bible students had different expectations as to what would happen. And some of these expectations did not realize. Note 3 false expectations. Well, for one, they thought, the brothers, that 1914 would be a turning point for the literal city of Jerusalem, because the prophecy said that the treading down of Jerusalem would be ending in 1914. Well, later on, we understood that it did not refer to the literal city of Jerusalem. Another expectation was that 1914 would bring the final end of the kingdoms of this world. This did not happen. Yes, the Watchtower in 1955 admitted, March 15 issue, many inaccurately thought that the World War, which began 1914, would merge into the battle of the great day of God Almighty, Armageddon. And as the Proclaimer's book says on page 61 and 62, some brothers are expected to go to heaven the first week of October in 1914. And this expectation did also not come true. Well, it is admitted in the 1998 Watchtower, some of their expectations were premature, and their view of what would happen was less than perfect. Of course, we are not perfect, therefore we do not understand the Bible in a perfect way. But unfulfilled expectations, is this a reason to leave the organization? No. Unfulfilled expectations on the part of the Adventists caused many of them to lose faith in the return of Christ. The Watchtower in January 1, 1911 brought a nice illustration. That if that date passes, it would mean merely that our chronology, our alarm clock, went off a little before the time. Would we consider it a great calamity if our alarm clock awakened us a few moments earlier in the morning of some great day full of joy? Surely not. Brother Russell said, the Lord did not say that the church would be glorified in 1914. Obviously, he said, we erred. Watchtower of April 15, 1916. And then Brother Alexander H. Macmillan, who was baptized in the year 1900, later said, I learned that we should admit our mistakes and continue searching God's word for more enlightenment. Any adjustments we would have to make would not change the gracious provision of the ransom and God's promise of everlasting life. How do you feel about the fact that Brother Russell and his friends admitted that they erred? And does this not install more confidence in their honesty? Then there were some wrong expectations as to the year 1925. Said in the Watchtower that that year will mark the beginning of the restoration of all things. Well, that didn't happen. And the yearbook 1980 says, in the report from France, some expected to go to heaven that year. Well, fortunately, very few left the truth. Most, they continued to maintain their expectation. And then there was the year 1975. And expectations were aroused through articles in our books and magazines. It was implied that one should expect Jehovah's Day in 1975, but it didn't come. And it was many brothers that had these wrong expectations. But really that expectation was aroused by the publishers of our books and magazines. Well, in the Watchtower of 1980, March 15, it says, it was presented as a possibility, but along with cautionary information, other statements implied that such realization of hopes was more a probability rather than a mere possibility. It is to be regretted, it says, that these later statements apparently overshadowed the cautionary ones and contributed to a build-up of the expectation already initiated. In Watchtower of July 1576, in English, it says, if anyone has been disappointed, his own understanding was based on wrong premises. The Watchtower included all disappointed ones of Jehovah's Witnesses, hence including persons having to do with the publications of the information that contributed to the build-up of hopes centered on that date. So how do you feel about the slave class admitting having set off or aroused wrong expectations since the year 1966 as to 1975? The fact that the Watchtower apologized for arousing these expectations, is this not an indication of the honesty of those of the faithful slave that work with the publication? Much better to keep in expectation, whereas on the other side, in Christendom, they are spiritually firmly asleep. Suppose a young lady is engaged and the fiancé calls her saying that he would come and visit her on a certain day, but he didn't say exactly at what time. Would you hold it against the young lady if every time a car stops near her home or in front of her home or passes by, she would run to the window in expectation of that visit? Well, several times her expectations may not be fulfilled, but finally the fiancé does arrive. It also brings home to us what Jesus said in Matthew 24:44, that it would come when the disciples would not expect it. So the only way to not get surprised is to always expect it, always reckon with it, keep in expectation. Another illustration. It's in connection with a pregnant woman. She's also in expectation. Well, some woman may conclude, now the baby is due, and she may be rushed to the hospital because she feels something, but then the baby had other thoughts about it. Well, there may be even a second false alarm because she didn't calculate exactly the time of conception. Well, will she then say, well, I guess the baby's not going to come after all, and sell the cradle and the baby items that she already had prepared? No, the baby will come even if it is through cesarean section. Jesus warned in Luke 21:34-36. He says, pay attention to yourselves that your hearts never become weighed down with overeating and anxieties of life, and suddenly that day be instantly upon you as a snare. For it will come upon all those dwelling upon the face of the earth. Keep awake then, he says, all the time making supplication. Indications accumulate that the day of Jehovah is getting close. No question that since 1914 we are indeed in the time of the end. Jesus said the good news of the kingdom will be preached in all the inhabited earth as a witness to all the nations. And then the end will possibly come. Did he say that? No. Did he say, and then the end will probably come? No. He said, then the end will come. Now, as far as the prophecy of the good news being preached to all the nations, has this already been fulfilled? Well, the Watchtower in 1995, September 1, said, after quoting Matthew 24:14, has this prophecy been fulfilled? Indeed, it has. The Cedar Point, Ohio Convention in 1922 urged all anointed ones to intensify kingdom proclamation. And we see that the figurative horsemen mentioned in Revelation chapter 6 are riding since 1914. And so we are ever getting closer to that great day of Jehovah. In Ezekiel chapter 38, in verse 22 and 23, there's another prophecy. It shows that during that day of Jehovah, people will kill one another, murder one another. And there would be epidemics, and there would be hailstones, fire and sulfur. And everyone would at the end know, as Jehovah says, that I am Jehovah. We see that shortly after the year 1914, there was a figurative fall of false religion, or Babylon the Great. That was in 1919. And since that time, true Christians are not under the domination of false religion anymore. We see that we understood the prophecy about Babylon better and better as the years went by. Well, the Bible depicts Babylon the Great as an immoral woman sitting on a scarlet-colored wild beast. Well, many years ago, our understanding was that it had to do with the Pope and the Catholic Pope. And illustrations depicted the Pope with his tiara or triple crown riding the political wild beast. Later it was thought that Babylon the Great was Satan's system, and particularly Christendom. Since 1963 we understand that Babylon pictures all false religions of the world. They all have their origin in the ancient city of Babylon. When Jehovah confused the languages and people spread all over the world, they took elements of the religion of Babylon with them. So there came Babylon the Great into existence. Before that, there was Babylon the Small. And the Bible shows that Babylon fell in 1919, but it was not destroyed. This destruction is still ahead of us. It will be the first phase of the Great Tribulation. And it will happen quickly. Revelation 18:8 says, like, in one day her plagues will come. Death and mourning, and she will be completely burned with fire. Then in chapter 18, verse 19, it says that she will be devastated in 1 hour. Revelation 17:16 says that the political powers will eat up Babylon. This may entail that they will confiscate all their real estate and bank accounts, maybe putting clergy in prison or even kill some. Only Jehovah's Witnesses will survive the destruction. And also later when Armageddon comes. Well, we see that we are getting near to this time, and the convention really has emphasized this subject. Well, we have many conventions in all parts of the world, and we are glad that we had many delegates from many different countries, even here at this convention. Would you like to know how many countries were represented here in Berlin? 47. And we had missionaries here from foreign countries, like from Benin, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Taiwan, Zambia, Malaysia, and many other countries. We were very happy to have fellowship with our dear missionaries that came home to visit with their families and this convention in their home country. And we are very happy to have had fellowship with delegates from many countries in the East, like Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Russia, Moldova, Kyrgyzstan, and others. And we want to commend you, brothers, here in the city for being willing to have them stay with you in your own private homes. The number that you accommodated here in your private homes is a total of 11,356. Thank you very much. And in addition, about 12,000 were accommodated in hotels. Well, this was really a special convention, was it not? So the faithful slave has prepared something special. And so we want at this point read to you a declaration in support of God's rulership. And it says, today, we as Jehovah's Witnesses assembled at this Keep on the Watch convention, and this is in Berlin, in Germany. We desire to go on record in making the following declaration in support of God's rulership. In this turbulent period of human history, rulership over Earth's billions is a key issue. Human rulerships face monumental challenges. Mankind is besieged with complex problems. All sectors of human society suffer from widespread crime, economic turmoil, environmental pollution, terrorism, wars, and moral breakdown. Human rulership has failed to bring relief from distressing problems afflicting this ailing world. And why? The Bible alone provides the right answer. At 1 John 5:19 we are told, the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one. Jesus Christ referred to that wicked one as the ruler of the world, identified in the Bible as Satan the devil. The devil has misled mankind into trusting in imperfect men for salvation. Such trust in mortal humans is futile. Under human rulership, the present system of things, its economic, political, religious, and social structure is in disarray. The prospects for better days ahead appear gloomy. But our outlook is different. We are convinced that, as the Bible clearly shows, it's high time to recognize the superiority of God's rulership. We are determined to help God-fearing people of all nations to trust that God's kingdom will soon administer all affairs of the earth. It is for this rulership that Jesus taught his disciples to pray, let your kingdom come, let your will take place as in heaven, also upon earth. Concerning the role of Jesus Christ and the permanence of God's kingdom rule over this earth, the prophet Daniel declared, to him, to Christ, there were given rulership and dignity and kingdom, that the peoples, national groups, and languages should all serve even him. His rulership is an indefinitely lasting rulership that will not pass away, and his kingdom one that will not be brought to ruin. God's kingdom with Christ as king is an expression of Jehovah's universal sovereignty. Soon Jehovah will settle for all time the issue raised by the devil's challenge regarding the rightfulness of God's sovereignty and his just, wise, and loving way of ruling his creatures. However, until then, we as Jehovah's Witnesses will continue to render relative subjection to the existing governmental authorities. We live in expectation of deliverance from the present system of things and all of its problems. God's promises of eternal life and endless blessings in a righteous new world will be fulfilled under Jehovah's rulership. Therefore, as part of a worldwide brotherhood, we declare ourselves to be unequivocally in full support of Jehovah God's rulership. All those in favor of this declaration, please say aye.
Wer dieser Erklärung zustimmen möchte, sage bitte Ja.
As Jehovah's day draws near, we will continue to sound the warning. Please read Isaiah chapter 30, verse 18.
Und deshalb wird Jehova darauf harren, alle die seiner harren.
How happy we will be to gain entrance into his righteous new world. Jehovah's day will rid the earth of all wickedness and establish paradise to follow. Well, some of you have been waiting for that for a long time, decades perhaps. But what we do now to keep in expectation will not be in vain. 1 Corinthians 15:58 assures us of this. It says there that your labor will not be in vain in connection with the Lord. Romans 5:5 says the hope does not lead to disappointment. Hebrews 11:1 shows that our expectation is an assured expectation. Paul also speaks of it of the eager expectation. Therefore, we should be determined to keep on in expectation, waiting for the day of Jehovah. In conclusion, I'd like to read you a comment that our dear brother Fred France once made. He said, our hope is a sure thing, and it will be fulfilled fully to the very last one of the 144,000, beyond what we have even imagined. It is something worth waiting for, even if it required 1,000,000 years. I never want to lose my appreciation for it. The hope of the little flock gives also assurance that the expectation of the great crowd of other sheep will, without any possibility of failure, be fulfilled beyond our brightest imagination. End of quote. What a glorious eternity awaits all of God's people thereafter. May that be the joyous and blessed lot of all of you here present today.